Good morning, everyone. My presentation focus on biodiversity assessment in South Africa. So South Africa has a long history of biodiversity monitoring, and its first attempt is represented in the NSBA 2004, which had strong special emphasis on special aspect of biodiversity. It was later broadened to incorporate broader theme of biodiversity, which then led to the establishment of the NBA 2011. The country, led by SANBI, is now working towards publishing its third report on the biodiversity status. So the new report, the new NBA, will report on current status of biodiversity across all realms. It will focus on the ecosystems, species, and at genetic level, as well as report on trends over time. It will also report on how the society is using biodiversity and how biodiversity management and conservation challenges are being dealt with. Like in many parts of the world, South Africa developed this assessment framework in an absence of internationally accepted guidelines. So when it developed this, there was no standard framework as to guide how the development should be. So as a result, this has caused confusion when it comes to reporting and some inconsistency. In an attempt to deal with these challenges, IUCN then developed a set of guidelines to standardize the assessment across all realms. These guidelines are aimed at promoting transparency and ensuring systematic and repeatability across all realms, as well as the assessments can be comparable. So because we now have an international framework or international standard of conducting the assessment, there has been increased pressure for South Africa to comply with the standards. So, but before South Africa can comply, we need to compare our own national approach of the assessment to the IUCN. So, just to see how different or similar they are. So, the first thing we did was to compare the two criteria that assesses special symptoms of ecosystem collapse. That is IUCN criterion A and South African criterion A1. So these two criteria identify ecosystems that have experienced significant reduction in geographic distribution, and then criterion D and C identify ecosystems that are small or that are restricted in geographic distribution and at risk of collapse from interacting with threatening processes. To conduct the assessment, the assessment was done using the terrestrial ecosystems, and then we did that we first did the data preparation process as well as documenting the steps we took in the model builder, and then we automated the assessment in R using the redlistr package that was developed by the IUCN. So when we compare the assessment outcomes of the two, using the two methods, we saw that the IUCN is less strict in terms of identifying threatened ecosystems. So like for South Africa, we see that there are red patches that shows that those are ecosystems that are critically endangered, and obviously for those ecosystems, there are stricter rules to discourage any development to take place in those areas, whereas IUCN just suggested that these ecosystems are critically endangered. So there's some land use. It obviously affects the land use activities. So it's a decision that South Africa has to make. If we are going to go with the IUCN approach or we're going to stick with the South African approach. So, as I said, it's less strict, and then we have started engaging with the international audience just to try to establish that relationship as well as to give us guidance in terms of how do we conduct the assessment. After all, this is new. It's not necessarily clear as to what needs to be done. So we have established that relationship with the IUCN. And then in terms of, as I said, in terms of aligning with the international, is still not clear as yet if we are going to align with the IUCN. Maybe for the future assessment we might, but there's still things that needed to be sorted out, and most importantly was the scale, because most of the criteria obviously have been developed at the international level. So South African ecosystems are small, and then they don't get to be picked up by the IUCN, for example, the IUCN threshold that they use. So that is why now we have instances whereby South Africa is saying that these ecosystems are threatened, but the IUCN is saying that they're not. Thank you.